This video is about there's a main tribe in West Africa. You find this tribe in a couple of countries: Togo, Benin Republic. Some people say Benin Republic. A few of them in Ghana, but most of all they reside in Nigeria, southwestern Nigeria, which is where it's close to the ocean, on the west coast of Africa. And this tribe is called Yoruba. And there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the origins of a lot of black people in the past couple of weeks. And I think that this might be something that might be enlightening for some. The Yoruba people, they have a very vibrant culture, and there's a lot of historical knowledge that gets passed down from generation to generation. And sometimes those historical knowledge is always somewhat diluted, and sometimes you may have two versions of a story, for example. So for example, most tribes in Africa always have what you may call an origin story. In the case of the Yorubas, they have somewhat of a spiritual or mystical origin story, which suggests that the world started with them. Like when God was creating the world, he put one of their patriarchs in charge of things, and they founded this place that is in the middle of the Yoruba people. So yeah, of course, most people don't really pay too much attention to that. But they have another story of migrating from the northeastern part of Africa towards Arabia. And in even this story, there's two versions of it. One version says they came from Egypt. The other version says they came from Arabia. And the one that came from, the one talking about Egypt, I really don't know much about it. It could be that maybe when they left Arabia, they may have stayed in Egypt for a while. I don't know. Or they may have already originally came from Egypt before they went to Arabia and then came back. So I don't know about that, but this is what the story is about. There is a fellow that they always reference to be the father of Oduduwa. And this fellow is called Lamurudu. Now, for linguists, the linguistic people, they believe that this just means that this Oduduwa person is descended from the tribe of Nimrod, which are a tribe of Canaanites. And but the baseline is that name Lamurudu is like another way of saying Nimrod. Because sometimes the Yorubas will use L, the letter L, when another people will use N for the same word. So that's where they came up with that. So this Oduduwa was supposedly like a prince, and was living in somewhere in Arabia. And there was a situation where I think some of the people that were his subjects were Muslims, and then the other ones are people that practice like traditional religions, mystical things, and worshiping different idols and gods. So there was a prince by the name of Brahima, which is like Ibrahim. And this Ibrahim fellow is a very conservative Muslim, and decided that he was going to destroy his father's idols and worshiping altars and stuff like that. So he was caught. He was caught doing that, and when he was caught, the people surrounding the king said, "Hey, there's a penalty for this, and the penalty is that the guy he has to be put to death." And I think from what I understand, the guy was burnt. They burnt him. So when this happened, a lot of the Muslims in the area that supported that Prince Ibrahim decided to take it on the king and his family. So they decided to, start like something like a civil war, and start fighting against this king and his family, burning, the palace and trying, killing a bunch of people, and that eventually this king and his, some of his children escaped and, started to leave the area, and that they found their way through Egypt, Sudan, Chad to Nigeria, and that some of them ended up settling in a place called Kukawa, which is like the capital of the Borno Empire. The Borno, they call it Kanem Borno. It's like a big empire that was active in medieval times, and then the rest of them migrated to what we now refer to as the Yoruba land. And from what I also understand, when they got to the place that they stayed in now, there were people living there already, and some of these people were what you may consider as pygmies today. And these are some of the things that if you go through the historical records going back thousands of years, it is true that a lot of the people that were living in Western Africa and Central Africa were the pygmies. And the other thing that happened is when he got to the place called Ile-Ife, he now had children, and all his children now ended up establishing different kingdoms, starting from Ile-Ife onward. The Egbas, the Oyo. There's one of his sons called Oromiyan, ended up becoming a king in Benin, and he was also the one that founded Oyo. And another one is founded Ila-Orogun. There were two of his children that ended up in Benin Republic. One is the king of Sabe, and the other one is the king of Ketu. So these kings ended up becoming the nucleus of the Yoruba people, and culture. They brought a lot of cultural things. They continue to worship those idols and different gods, and they mix with the local population, and that's how that ended, and continued. And one of the things that I ended up finding out later on, there was a British explorer, I think his name is Clapperton, and he met with the Sultan of Sokoto in 1823, I believe. And according to that Sultan of Sokoto, he sort of confirmed this story by saying that when he was describing some of the kingdoms that are neighboring him, he mentioned the Yorubas and said that they are believed to have originated from the Nimrod tribe of Canaan. And so that's something that just makes you think that there may be something to that story. Now, another thing is a lot of the African tribes that I have researched, not all of them, but many of them, always have stories similar to this, talking about they migrated from the north to the east. And it's also a fact that And you look at the Sahara Desert today, the scientists believe that long ago, people used to live in many of those places before they became, deprived of water and had to move away. And a lot of them ended up moving south into the central part of Africa. And so I believe there's got to be some truth to some of these things. And one of the things that is also apparent about the Yorubas is that Yoruba people have Muslims that have been, with them for a long time. They have always had Muslims as part of their population. And it's not that they just got converted by recent contact with Muslims. These are folks that have Muslim names going back generations, and there is a lot of cultural practices that they have similarities with the Muslims also. For example, most Yoruba people don't eat pork, and it's just some of those things that you just notice that they don't eat pork without really knowing exactly why. So you just grow up in a family and they'll give you all different types of meat except pork. They never really come out and say, hey, we do not eat pork, or there's something we have against pork. You just don't end up seeing it around you when you go to buy food somewhere. They'll make every kind of meat except pork. And that's one thing that I've noticed also, that is like probably related to the fact that these folks are people that may have had some influence of Islam at their core in the beginning. So even though a lot of them did not, practice the religion, some do, but even the ones that don't still end up not eating pork. And yeah, so these Yoruba people, they ended up, the different kings, they ended up having somewhat of subgroups amongst them also, and they all speak the same language, but they are different dialects, and they have a very robust cultural life, and lots of cultural practices, dances, and historical records that is fascinating today. And of course, the descendants of Yorubas are all over the world, and everywhere they go, they always leave a cultural mark. It's one of the most African tribes that are left today with a robust native culture that I believe is very important and should be studied more, and people need to know more about it, because most of a lot of African societies now are very influenced by the Western culture and the Arabian culture also. But the Yorubas, even though they have some influences, like I said, from Islam and everything, it's still one of those cultures that is really just homegrown, with a lot of stories and folklore that goes back thousands of years. So I think it's a very important culture to study in Africa. And it also is important because of all the connections to different parts of the world, like a lot of the South American and Caribbean, African, remnants of African culture that you see. A lot of it traces back to the Yoruba people, and I think it's important for people to know about. I'm gonna make another video concerning the Yorubas, because this is just like the beginning of the story. I will talk more about what happened later on, and how they got to where they are today. Thank you guys.